this police operation pulling in forces across the country, spanning hundreds of miles. And this morning, we had the chance to speak to one of Abdul Ezedi's neighbours, in fact, his next-door neighbour, speaking for the first time. He told us that he had spoken to Ezedi a couple of times. He'd been in the building that they shared, a block of social housing, for around 4 months. He said that their interactions weren't meaningful and that Ezedi kept himself to himself. Sometimes he brought Ezedi coffee and left it on his doorstep, but that was the extent of their interactions. That man then went on to describe how he was told about Ezedi's links to this incident in Clapham earlier in the week. He said that he was shocked and that he was upset. He also raised concerns that he had around Ezedi's background. We now know that he had been convicted of sex offences. That man said that he was upset that he hadn't been told about who he was living next to, and this is what he had to say in a further clip. Just take a listen.
It's not known. It's a case of sort of, in my eyes, if you know something, you can protect yourself from it. So I'm not saying they were at risk, but my granddaughters and grandchildren and daughter and sons have been in that building. And not knowing the person who's next door isn't a problem to me, but if my children knew, they wouldn't allow my granddaughters and grandsons to be in that building. It doesn't matter whether if it's a refugee or a millionaire, you don't know their criminal past. And it's government agencies put members of public at risk.
So Ezedi's neighbour there raising his concerns, and as this manhunt continues, more detail is emerging. We now know that one of Ezedi's relatives is encouraging him to hand himself in. Sky News also understands that he was in a relationship with a woman involved in this incident. Over the last couple of days, what we've been trying to do here in Newcastle is establish a sense of who he was, as well as speaking to his next-door neighbour. We also spoke to a man who owns a Kurdish grocery store. He said that Ezedi visited the store regularly and would go in to buy halal meat. He also described him as unassuming and quiet. We also know that Ezedi used a number of services as well in the area. One of those services was linked to the Catholic Diocese of Hexham and Newcastle, a refugee project in which they would bring him things like hygiene supplies and groceries, as well as someone who is in need. They say that they're looking further into any ties that he may have had with the Catholic Church, but those so far have been inconclusive. But what we're getting here is a sense of a person who people are scratching their heads about, someone who was seen as unassuming and quiet, who is now linked to a major national manhunt.